By the way, I know some of the kids that are still here with us might be a little antsy, so if you can find Chrissy Boyce, she has coloring sheets, and Miss Erica has crayons. Or I guess Chrissy has the crayons now too, so. All right, there's a lot there, right? So we're gonna unpack tonight some of that in our Q&A. And so I know that was a lot of information, but we're trying to find the best way to keep the body updated because we believe the body makes decisions together and needs to be informed to make those decisions. And so we want to find the best way to deliver that information to you. But information without the context of God's mission is just that. It's just a bunch of facts and figures. And frankly, it's boring. It's only when those facts and figures are put in the context of what the overall picture of God is doing in the world that they become exciting. Even the problems and challenges that we face become exciting opportunities to trust God for His provision and guidance. And so our vision has always been as a church plant, as a church, to be, if I could rephrase it in terms that Christian used this morning in his sermon, a beautiful community that displays the beautiful news of God. He used the phrase of a sparkling like a diamond. As we obey the great commandments, increasingly in our pursuit of the Great Commission, we want to not just be a beautiful display of the gospel in Columbia, but we want to multiply these, what we have called communities of light, multiplying disciples, but not merely reproducing Christian individuals, but molding Christian communities. God's mission, especially here in North America, involves enfolding disaffected and bored consumers into communities of disciples that realize and express what Peter calls the multicolored grace of God in the world, in their life together, displaying the gospel in word and deed before men and angels. The scriptures say that in God's purpose, His eternal purpose during the present age, is that through the church, the manifold, the multicolored wisdom of God would be seen and put on display for the rulers and heavenly principalities. We are on display for angels. That's what the church is for. And men. We are the pillar and buttress of the truth in the world. The visible display of gospel truth. A city on a hill. We are to be lights in the world. And we don't want to just light one candle in this present darkness, but we want to unleash as many candles as we can to flood the world with what the Apostle John calls the light of men. And that is the life of God that's in Christ Jesus. And in particular, what that means for us is that we have always set to be a church planting engine that sends, supports, and resources other gospel-centered churches and church plants in the Midlands, in the Southeast, and really throughout the world. What we're experiencing at this phase of our young life, Riverside is almost 8 years old this year, we will be in October, is growth pains that comes with our approaching adolescence. Moreover, we've moved out of the crib and out of the toddler bed into our own room. And we've made our first real attempts, if somewhat awkwardly, at multiplication through church planting. But we're still learning our balance. We're still gaining needed strength and growing into the proper proportion as a body. We want to keep growing in this grace and in the power that Christian talked about this morning, the power of love. We want to grow in maturity and in the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to shine all the brighter in our place where God has set us as a lampstand, and to be more useful for the purposes of our Heavenly Father. We've moved from the crib into a relatively small room. And even now, at 8 years old, we're approaching capacity again. What do I mean by capacity? Financially, as Landon explained, our financial growth rate is decreasing. We're growing, but the rate of growth is decreasing. And a large part of that is because the number of people that can be concluded in the community is starting to reach its capacity. It's not just that people have stopped giving or their giving has dropped off. The numbers don't seem to reflect that. It's rather, we just are sort of reaching our limit in what we can continue to grow in. Moreover, physically, our space is limited. Our gathering space is limited, both in the sanctuary and in the kids' space. Some of the capacity has been people resource based. So the discussion last fall was about people in children's ministry. Do we have enough volunteers to serve our present children? Or our coaching team, do we have enough coaches to adequately equip and empower and encourage our small group leaders so they're equipped to care for these small group communities that are the lifeblood of Riverside? And do we have enough small group leaders? Far too many of our small groups are frankly too big. They need to multiply, and we need new leaders to do that. And for that reason, our vision in 2017 has been, as you heard in the video, to increase ministry capacity by raising up servant leaders. So that's been our focus. And we hope to always be doing this as a church that is faithful to the Great Commission. We're making disciples, we hope, who will in turn make disciples. And we are always continually asking the Lord of the harvest to raise up laborers, because as Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So we have to ask. We have to ask the Lord of the harvest to provide. Right now, most especially, we need high-level leaders, specifically elders and deacons. As a leadership team, we're laboring to train and develop these leaders for the near future, but we need your help as a congregation. We're asking you to help identify potential leaders and nominate them tonight. God raises up leaders for his people through his people's encouragement. It says a congregation that we experience the ministry of those Christ has gifted the body with, that those ministries become visible and affirmed. It's the body that not only gives their consent, but affirmation and says, yes, we know this brother, we know this sister, we know their ministry, we've been blessed by it, and we affirm them, and we nominate them. In fact, let me encourage you, if you know someone who you think is a potential future leader for God's people, whether that's a small group leader or that's a deacon or an elder or a church planter, would you encourage them? They need encouragement more than you realize. And then would you maybe think about suggesting that they participate in our upcoming leadership intensive that will be launched in September to train new leaders, not just for Riverside, but for God's people all over the world. Having said that, there are some limitations that leadership development, volunteer training, and focused task-specific discipleship just can't fix. And space is one of those. It appears now that we're approaching that impasse. As you guys noticed today, Sunday, the week of July 4th, people are having a hard time finding a seat. In the high times during our spring and our fall, we saw the same thing. So we will anticipate the same realities will be there for us in the fall, especially with students coming back. Now, you'll remember when we bought this building, we knew we'd be running into this problem sooner than later. Why did we do such an idiotic thing? Why did we move into such a small room, as it were? Well, the lion's share reason of that was because we wanted to stay honest to the original vision of being a church planting church. We didn't want to get comfortable. We wanted to start planting as soon as possible. And we understand that most churches that are planting in the U.S. are between 300 and 500 in their membership. That's small enough for them to stay nimble and flexible, but it's big enough to maintain momentum after hiving off new church plants and financially sustaining those plants. We're a church of roughly 350 now. Our membership's approaching 200. We are on the cusp of that range. Not only is this in some ways where we thought we might find ourselves a year plus into the building, it's also where we want to be. We're where we want to be. And in particular, the leadership has posited that in addition to supporting the church plants in our city and region that you saw up there tonight, we want to aim to plant a new church in Columbia out of Riverside by 2020. That is what we are proposing. That's a big goal. It is, I think, a God-sized goal, and it will require God-sized provision, guidance, and direction. Part of what we're asking you as the congregation of this church, as the people of God, is to begin praying for God's provision and his direction on this initiative that we're offering for your consideration and up to God for his clear direction. Now, what do we need to plant a church? It's easy to say, well, just why, if we're so big, why not just plant a church? We need a church planter. We need qualified leadership. And we need God to raise up a church planting resident who would be able to stay here, build relationships here, and be followed as he goes out from here to plant. Right now, we do have one candidate in the works, Daniel Dugas and his wife, Bridget. They are going to be visiting Riverside later in July to explore. They're interested in planting in Columbia. This is the first steps. We don't know where it's going to go. He's going to do an internship with his home church in Oklahoma. If they give him the thumbs up in their pre-assessment of him, then he would go ahead and start fundraising to do the residency here at Riverside. Then he would be assessed at Riverside. If he goes forward, then we would begin the definite plans of planting a new church starting in 2020 would be the plan. He'd get here in 2019. He would probably start forming a core group in the fall of 2020. That would be the ideal. But we need, right now, that's just a dream. So we need prayer. Is that even what God wants to do? Is this the right fit? Secondly, we need people. Will you be one of those who will go when the time comes? Will you be ready to sacrifice? For some of us who've been at this with Riverside planning in 8 years, we're understandably tired. And we're like, somebody else can go. I've already done that. But what if it's you? What if you're called to plan again? And then we need strategy. We need strategy of how to deal with the limitations that God's in his providence placed on our table. The staff team's been discussing our present capacity questions, especially in children's space. Erica has been very persistent, very gracious to say, hey, children's space, we're kind of running out of space. We need to do something. We have been thinking about this for some time. We've proposed to the elders as a staff that we consider transitioning to 2 services, possibly as early as the spring of 2018, perhaps the fall, as our next step to 2 purposes, for 2 ends. One, to continue our mission to make and mold disciples of Jesus through the diversified ministry of the Word that gets expressed in our Sunday gatherings, both in the children's space and here in the sanctuary, and in the rich ministry of our small groups, where the ministry of the Word is fleshed out. Our desire is not simply to rearrange the furniture of Christendom, that is to say, to just reassign Christians to different churches, but to empower every Christian who comes through our doors to be obedient and to be empowered to make disciples themselves. And we want to increase capacity because we want to see conversions. We want people who don't know Jesus yet to have an opportunity to hear the gospel, whether that's a Sunday morning, whether that's with their kids in children's ministry, or that's in their small groups that they're visiting and participating in. We believe the ministry of the Word, faithfully sown, though arduous and often discouraging, will bear fruit in time, sprouting new seedlings and maturing young seedlings into mighty trees. If more are coming to participate in our life together around Jesus and his Word, then we want to be able to welcome them. Second reason why we would propose this strategy is we believe moving to 2 services in the near future will grow our capacity toward that further realization of our vision to be a church planting hub in the Midlands, resourcing newer plants in our city, region, and world. And more specifically, a move to 2 services will provide a rhythm in which to incubate a new church plant in 2020, in which one of those services will be dedicated to the new church plant. Would you pray about this possible next step? Would you pray for God's guidance and clear direction? What roles might we all play in order to make that step if God is guiding us in that direction? And speaking of our building and its limitations, as a congregation, we've decided, remember in 2015, to pay the building off in 7 years, beginning in 2016. We're currently not on course to do that. So would you pray and consider whether you are willing to commit to that plan, to pay it off now in 6 years, so that more of our resources can be devoted to church planning and missions here and abroad? That is a decision we formally made back in March of 2015, but one we would formally make again to reaffirm or to say, no, we're not going to do that in December of this year. We will formally vote on that then. Finally, remember why we're in this thing in the first place. We want Jesus to be made much of in Columbia through the making of new disciples, through the repairing of broken lives, and through the growth of love. And in the multiplication of discipling communities, the multiplication of small groups and churches, Jesus, we want to see his name made great in this city. Are we on board for this? Are we focused as an entire family on our mission to make and mold disciples for Christ here in our city and beyond? If so, we will begin to make great sacrifices for the mission, even as we find our hearts filled with his promised presence and power through the Holy Spirit to fulfill that mission. Our next steps, we are going to talk a little about our leadership, some of those leadership changes, and then we're going to pray and then open this up for discussion. So speaking of those leadership transitions, I'm going to, first of all, invite Eric Kimmery to come forward. Eric is currently stepping off. As of June of this year, Eric's fulfilled his 3-year term as an elder. Eric has not just served as one of the inaugural elders together with Michael Capaldo and Tony Bell of Riverside, but Eric has served as a key leader at Riverside from day one. And by day one, I don't mean its first public launch, its first service. I mean before Riverside was even an idea in our head. Eric has played a critical role. And I personally want to say he has played a critical role in my life. Eric has himself not just sacrificed in leading Riverside with zeal, energy, and with his own resources from the beginning, but even before Riverside was an idea, he sacrificed to be a part of this. He sacrificed personally, that cost him in ways that were painful to be a part of this. And I think God has honored that sacrifice. And Eric, I think God will continue to honor that. The promise of Scripture is God says he is not so unjust as to forgive your faithfulness and your love. And so he will reward and continue to pay that. But Eric, I just want to say in front of the family that I am very grateful for you, brother. You have been a key, not only co-laborer, but a friend to me. So thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Let's give him an expression of our... Before you sit down... River, before you sit down, I have your gift, virtually. This is what we were going to hand you tonight. There was a little snafu in the shipping, but we are giving him the complete set of Francis Schaeffer's works. He's a bit of a Francis Schaeffer geek, and so we thought we'd bless him in that way, but thank you, brother. Thank you. Real quick overview, as you guys are thinking about names to nominate tonight for elders and deacon candidates, quick review of what the qualifications for elders and deacons are. Both have the following basic qualifications. One, they exemplify Christian character consistently. And that exemplified character is expressed in their relationships, especially their most intimate relationships, in their families, if they're married, with their spouse, and if they have children, with their children as parents. It's exemplified in their workplace, in their neighborhood. For elders, in addition to exemplified Christian character and Christian relationships, there is also for both candidates, for both elder and deacon, a clear, and I'm going to say practical grasp of the gospel. They get the gospel and they understand how it applies to their life, and their life is different and continues to change because of their understanding of the gospel. And they know how to speak practically into the lives of others. Elders in particular are not just simply able to understand the gospel and show its practical significance in their manner of life and their character, but they're able to teach as well. They're able to communicate clearly, not necessarily preach, but they can communicate clearly the gospel's meaning and correct bad versions of the gospel, twisted versions, because they are called to protect the flock. And part about how they do that is by vouchsafing the word entrusted to them, guarding the good deposit of the gospel, and teaching it aright to the flock. Moreover, elders are to be men known for their hospitality because they're men on mission. They have an open door to the world, not just to fellow Christians. The Greek word for hospitality means lover of strangers. So it's not just brothers and sisters they're bringing into their homes, it's strangers, it's outsiders. They live their life on mission. They understand the gospel's call to go and make disciples, and they live that out. And they have a good reputation, not just in the church, but with outsiders. Why? Because they're loving their neighbors and serving them on mission. So they're known. They're known by their neighbors. So those are the kind of a brief overview of the characteristics of an elder and a deacon. The diaconal roles, I think we have a slide that we currently have needs for, are the benevolence team. Do we have that slide? Okay. Cassie was kind of fulfilling this role, but she rolled off because of Wilder, who's here. Hey, Wilder. That's a very good reason for Cassie to roll off and to focus on that whole process with Wilder and being a mom to Wilder. Cassie did an amazing job. I'm not going to say that means you should definitely write her name down, but you might think about it. We also had a lot of help in our benevolence ministry already through the Mannings. Mark and Katie have just been an incredible help for us as we've thought through our process of how do we care for those who are most needy in our community. So the Mannings have been a huge blessing in that. Please thank them tonight, as well as the pastors. Thank you. We need someone to lead city missions. Like, we have local mission here that's going on all the time, and it's kind of piecemeal. It would be great to have a deacon of city missions who oversees Allen Benedict Court. That doesn't mean they run it, they just help coordinate it. They oversee our partnership with Ezekiel Ministries. They work with our small groups to coordinate our mission in our small groups. I'd love to see us reboot Theology on Tap, where we are inviting people to come discuss gospel topics in a neutral space like a brewery or a bar room, where we can talk about these things with non-Christians in a non-threatening environment. It would be great to have some leaders who'd be willing to step up and love to serve that way. We need a deacon of worship. Josiah has been playing an amazing role, basically fulfilling that function for the last year almost, hasn't it been? Where's Josiah? Yeah, so you guys need to give him a pat on the back. Christian Crouch has been serving a critical role in that as not just small groups pastor, but really putting a lot of leadership into our worship. And of course, all the leaders that Landon listed in the video have been so critical. Christian Markle, I especially thank you, brother. Where are you? Man, you've just been killing it. Thank you for all that you're doing with the audiovisual. But we definitely need some help here. And then building and grounds. Stephen is currently the deacon of building and grounds. But as you can see, that's a lot. He needs help. So he says a hearty amen to that. So if you are interested in being part of a diaconal team to help either with the building upkeep or with the grounds upkeep, we need help with that, and if there's names that come to mind. All right. So the nomination forms will go out tonight, and over the next 4 Sundays, you will have an opportunity to drop those names in a box. You can also do this online on the bridge. There's an online nomination form. You don't have to log in. We made it as simple as possible. And it's that way it can be anonymous as well. The elder board will vote and then present the final candidates to the congregation by November 4th. So November 4th, we'll present the final names based on the nominations. This will give the congregation 4 weeks to pray, meet with potential candidates, share any concerns or affirmations with the elders. All right. Any questions about that process? We'll have a Q&A here time in about 10 minutes, but I guess really we need to be praying for the next 15 minutes. So Landon, why don't you come up and lead us in our prayer time together?
Thanks, James. Like I said in the video, we're starting an ongoing discussion tonight. We're going to start that discussion with the Lord through prayer. I think about this stuff all the time. I've been overwhelmed for probably about a year thinking about this coming, and it's been driving me to more and more dependence on God in prayer. So I know tonight we're going to have a lot of detailed questions, and over this whole fall, we'll have a ton of logistical detailed questions. But before we do that, could we spend 20 minutes praying for these things and asking for the Lord to give us his wisdom and his provision? So I kind of wrote these 4 things that I think we really need to focus on this fall. Starting tonight, we want you to pray them in small groups. We're going to try to pray them as our prayers of the people on Sundays. We're going to actually come up with something better looking than this, and we're going to hand them out. And we really want to call you guys to prayer. Before we would vote on anything or make any decisions on anything, we have got to pray. And I mean, more than anything, there will be no wisdom from me or anybody else that can figure this out. So we need elders to raise up. We need Lord to raise up his elders, so we need to pray for that. This wisdom and growing and sending and multiple services and all the stuff you've heard tonight, please pray. It's daunting, but it's exciting and challenging. And then provision and resources. As we have a slowdown, we're going to start talking this week as staff and deacons. Do we need to start cutting some things? And maybe we should. We need wisdom for that. So we don't not resource the mission, but we get really wise about how we do and what we spend. And we need help with that, so please pray. And then making and molding disciples. Please, as we figure out these logistical things for our church, let's not forget to share the gospel and to make disciples and to mold them in the faith, because that's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. So we're going to spend about 20 minutes praying, 15 to 20 minutes. And then at 6:30, we're going to come back together and we're going to hand out the nomination forms. And then we're going to have 30 minutes of Q&A. And for those of you that got kids that got to leave, you can leave at any point during that time. The child care will be over at 7. And then for those of you that want to stick around, we'll have an extended Q&A till about 8 o'clock. So that's kind of where we're headed the rest of the night. But I'd love for you guys to break up, if you can, or pray with your kids about these 4 things for the next 15, 20 minutes, and we'll come back about 6:30. Thanks.
All right, if you're wrapping up, go ahead and finish up the last sentence. Say, in Jesus' name, amen. We pray through Jesus, not because it's magic, but because he's our intercessor. I think somebody has the nomination cards to hand out. Ross has those. So Ross, if you would go ahead and, you got yours? Good, thanks Liam. What you're going to get is the nomination cards for elders and for deacons. You don't have to turn those in tonight, though you certainly can. You certainly are welcome to do that. Remember, the next 4 weeks we'll be doing that. Now we're gonna start our Q&A. So we have about 30 minutes for questions and answers. On the sheet you have that was handed out earlier tonight, that has the dates on one side and the ministry needs, and on the other side are next steps. You'll see kind of what I'm getting at here when I talk about the next steps for the discussion. We believe that what we're trying to process together is really important for the whole body to be a part of, and that we've got to figure this out together. So we want to have a process for engaging and continuing this conversation. So it begins tonight. There will be an extended Q&A time if you'd like after 7, if you want to stick around and ask more questions. At least the staff elders, maybe a few of the elders will be able to stick around and answer those questions. But beyond that, there will be an email that's going out to all the members. That email will have this video you saw tonight, and I think some footage from tonight. I'm not sure, but a summary of what we covered tonight for those that missed it. And then we're going to have conversations in our small groups. So there will be specifically the question about vision to plant in 2020, and the next step moving toward that of praying for a resident and going to possibly 2 services, and then a building commitment loan payoff question to discuss with the small groups. If we need to have another congregational meeting because things emerge out of those discussions, we'll aim to do another one in October. Otherwise, the next family meeting is December 10th. And you can see all those details there on that list. All right? Well, let's go ahead and get started. We've got about 30 minutes for any questions you have before we got to go get our kids. So I invite all the elders to come and sit in the elder chairs. I know in the high church they have thrones. We don't get those. Which one are we using? Oh, we're using that one. Okay.
Is this on? If you do have a question, please ask it in the handheld mic because we are recording this for the members who weren't able to be here. And they won't know what the question is if you don't ask it in the mic. So that'd be very helpful.
Where's Josh Parks? He usually does this. Do you want to do this? You're like really great at emceeing this kind of stuff, bro.
No, not Josh.
I don't know. What am I doing? I got
We
you.
won't remember to do that.
Was there a question? Did I miss the question? I was talking.
Yeah, Tanner Arrington has a question in the back.
Tanner.
So maybe I missed this, but if elders are transitioning off, what's the timeline for installing new elders, but also what happens while those elders have stepped off? So in between, will there only be 2 elders, 3 elders?
When
That's a
can
great
you be
question.
Minimum number of elders.
And do our bylaws dictate a minimum number of elders? That tag was from Josh.
Yes.
Our bylaws require require 4 non-vocational elders, one more than vocational elders. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
So we have, by the end of this year, Tony and Michael will be rolling off, and there will be only one non-vocational sucker. By the end of this year, we really need to install, but to stay in line with our bylaws, is to install 3 new elders. Are you volunteering?
Yeah, that's right. Our bylaws require 51%. We call them non-occupational elders. It's the same thing as non-vocational. But the idea is that there's a majority of those elders who are not paid to shepherd the flock, who are on the board. And with Eric rotating off, we are currently at 50-50. So our timeline is as soon as possible. We'd like to. We've Josh Parks, Daniel Ellis, and the pastoral interns have been on the leadership training group, which is our training ground for eldership. But for a variety of reasons, none have yet, as in right now, been able to have been affirmed and voted on now. But there are options there in the near future that some of them will be. And we hope some of the newer guys that have been added this year that Landon mentioned in the video, Martin, Kit, Tim, Bunch, I think those were the 3. And we're hoping Andy will step on, so that they'll be ready sooner than later. But we don't know for sure whether they'll be ready to go by December, that December vote. Yeah, great question. Sorry, Josh. You got to run. Go, Josh, go.
This is really simple. I'm just wondering, I heard you say November earlier than a 4-week window to be able to speak with folks and make a decision to have an announcement by January 1, I'm assuming is what or mid-December?
According to our bylaws, we need to announce the candidates that the elders have approved to the body 4 weeks before a vote.
Okay.
So November 4th is the deadline for a December 10th family meeting for us to tell you guys, based on the nominations, here's the 2 or 3 folks for elders that we're proposing to you. And then you have 4 weeks to kind of pray, interact with those candidates, and so on.
Is there a deadline for nomination?
You have 4 weeks from today.
From today?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Spees said to keep the 51% percentage. We're just going to have to fire one of the existing occupational elders.
He's wearing a Tennessee hat. Come on, man.
You're not helping your case, Christian, with that hat. I'm
Low
noticing.
man on the totem pole. I see how it is.
Yes, right. He's a volunteer. That's good.
I see what you did there. I see it.
Yes, Joe Ellis asked if we could get a reminder of who the deacons are. And I could do that, but you guys can do that too. So.
Well, the guy holding the microphone is a deacon of everything. Josh Parks is a deacon. Dorothy Moore is a deacon, and they serve in coordinating small groups, men's ministry, small groups, women's ministry. Stephen Justice is deacon truly of almost everything, building and grounds and communications in his staff role. Erica Kimmery is deacon over children's ministry, giving some oversight to youth ministry and Will's World, our special needs ministry. Ross Schold is our deacon of hospitality, and Martin Graham, who's not here, I can't see his face, he's our deacon of global missions. So that's who we currently have as our deacons. Some are staff, some are non-staff.
I have a question. If we are behind in giving, how come we never preach on tithing and giving? And then part two, if we are going to potentially refinance the building, what are what would the term of the loan be? Like what, and I guess the amount.
All right,
The logistics of that.
I'll take the second one because that's the easiest one. So, back in 2015, we originated a 7-year loan for the building, okay, with payments over 20 years, okay, so, which is very typical in this type of transaction. So we are not suggesting that we refinance today. We are not even considering refinancing, to the best of my knowledge, even in the next 2 years. What we are talking about is, do we want to hold, as a church, entering into that discussion, do we want to hold a mortgage or a loan balance for the foreseeable future? So how in 7 years when our loan matures and we have to refinance it or renew it, a typical term would be another 5 or 7 years, and with payments of 13 years remaining. Does that make sense? Okay. Hopefully that didn't open Pandora's box.
Why don't we preach on giving more often? That was
Yeah, that's a good question.
Why don't we preach on giving more often? I think, I know this can be used as a cop-out, but I don't think it is. As a church that's committed to expository preaching, we preach kind of what the text says. So when a text that deals with giving, when we, for instance, dealt with do not steal, we did address giving in 2 sermons. But unless it sort of naturally fits into a text that doesn't directly deal with it, I'm not typically going to bring up those issues. Now, maybe we should be more deliberate about that, just like you can. I mean, the Bible, I believe the biblical text has one meaning, but innumerable applications. So I could get a legitimate giving application probably out of almost any text. If I did that all the time, you guys would be real suspicious of me, of course. But could we do that more deliberately in light of our giving, our growth rate dropping a little bit? Perhaps, yeah, we could emphasize that more from the pulpit. Yeah.
One thing I want to reiterate is this isn't all you people here aren't doing enough. We're actually really encouraged that people are very much engaged. And what's going on with you in your own heart before the Lord, that's between you and the Lord. It's that we are getting to a place where we're used to every year jumping up more and more and more. And we're just saying we're not going to be able to anymore. And so even if 20, 30 more people came on Sundays and we grew a little bit larger as a body, we're just slowing down where we're going to be able to to handle things. And that's not a bad thing. That's just kind of where we are because of our vision to remain a certain size, to plant. And so we always knew that would happen, and now it's happening. We're just kind of bringing it up. So we don't want you to hear, you guys aren't doing enough, do more. That's not necessarily it. It's just like, oh, that time is arriving. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to handle it, if that makes sense? So I guess what I'm saying is if we preached a bunch of great sermons on giving more, we would always have this problem at some point. We have the people that God's given us, and we love you all, and we're all putting our time, talents, and treasure together towards this vision.
So you guys have talked a couple times about maybe going to 2 services, and then at one point you said maybe incubating a church plant in that. Have you guys spitballed through this enough to see whether or not this is going to look a bit like it did while we were in the museum? We have a children's ministry service, and we have a non-children's ministry service. Have you guys thought through that at all to see if we'll have the same kind of issues that we had at the last family meeting about not enough volunteers? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No. I mean, that's a great question. We are not coming tonight saying we think we're going to move to 2 services in 3 months. Let's all get on board. This is legitimately, it's going to be a lot for us. We're a lot of people with a lot of time, talents, and treasure, and we're all working very hard. And so what we're trying to kind of give the shot across the bow saying, I don't want to turn people away, but at the same time, I don't want to become a 3 or 4 service church. So what is the vision for that? Now, if we had a church planter here who was preaching and you guys knew him and he was going to leave, that would be a different conversation. But we realize we're in a place where we don't have that right now. So how are we going to handle growth towards that vision? So we're kind of shooting that across tonight and talking about it all through the fall. We're hoping to get your feedback on that. I mean, we'd love to hear from all you guys say, well, I'm not serving this way, or I'm not serving that way, or Jesus has changed my heart and I'll serve that way. But we have to hear from you guys. We can't come and say, here are all the details, get on board. We really have to hear from all of you. That's what we're trying to do tonight, is to say, here's our conversation. And as we head towards the spring, we'll start to share some more of those. All right, well, 2 services could look like this. 2 services could look like that. But I really believe that many of you have a lot of great ideas in here that we need to hear about.
Okay, so we talked about how, there are a lot of new people who weren't aware of the 7-year plan to pay off the building. And you mentioned it, and maybe you said it and I didn't hear it, but when are we going to have the actual talk and see, do we need to revisit that?
Right now. So this is it. This is for those of you that maybe you've become a part of Riverside since that decision of March of 2015, this is hey, we made that decision. And then the question is being raised, are you prepared to sort of give to the original goal? And then, Michael, maybe you can give the specifics of what it was the congregation agreed to give specifically. Do we have it on the slide? There we go.
Go up 2 slides, Michael says.
So let me just give an overview of where we are today, okay? So if we had not made that decision to pay off the building in 7 years back in 2015, our normal payment amortization schedule would have had us at the top number, okay? Or we'd still have $591,000 balance on our loan, okay? We are currently at $535,700. That's our current loan balance, okay? Now, we are behind approximately $40,000 on that. Not insurmountable, right? So we should be at right under $500,000 to be on pace to pay the building off in 7 years. What we did, to pay off the building in 7 years back, it required an additional $47,500 for the next 6 years, or I think it's $332,000. In addition to that, the church agreed through the general fund to contribute an extra $70,000. Okay, so between normal payments, $330,000 from the congregation and 70,000 from the general fund, that would pay off the loan completely. Does that make sense? Sort of, kind of? Okay. So I don't know if that's answers your
And the way, I don't know if it's clear, it hasn't always been clear to me that commercial loans work differently than your typical 30-year mortgage. Obviously, I don't want us to assume anybody doesn't get this, but I didn't always get this. So we're on pace to pay it off, making payments as if it's a 20-year loan, but we're trying to pay it off. It's at 7 years. Whatever's left comes due. We have to pay all that off at once or refinance. So that's how commercial loans differ than your traditional mortgage. And so it's whatever we pay until then plus that lump sum at the end. Otherwise, we refinance. So the 20-year, getting it on a 20-year track gives us the option of, if we hit lean times, we're paying that 20-year, a loan based on a 20-year amortization. And so, but we targeted to pay ahead of that schedule, and we're actually paying on a 7-year schedule. Our goal is to pay on a 7-year schedule, and that actually pays more of our principal each month, just like making extra mortgage payments. And so it's kind of, commercial loans are a little hard to understand, but that's why we're behind $40,000.
And when we say we're behind, it's just our goal. It's not, the bank isn't calling us up saying you're behind, you're behind, you're behind. No, we're actually ahead. They're actually upset with us.
That's a good, Tony said we're not as far ahead as we had wanted to be.
That's right.
That's a better way to put it.
But here's one more nugget that's really is hidden down there that I don't think we can see. But based on that being aggressive, paying it down aggressively, we've saved the church $14,000. Okay, so that's really great.
It is. That's awesome.
I'll say one thing about that. It's not just about the loan. When we made this decision, it wasn't, hey, we got a good rate at this kind of 720 loan. We all agreed that we really didn't want to carry debt that long, those of us that were here at that time. And we wanted to get used to having that much in our general fund so that when we did pay it off, we could funnel the money we were used to having towards mission, if that makes sense. Now, some of you who weren't here at that time, that's why we did that. So it kind of just happened to work out with the loan. So we did it not just to make an advantageous rate on a loan, but because of the vision and the mission. I think what we're saying tonight is we're really encouraged. That's amazing that's happening. We're just not on track to do what we wanted to do. And we're opening up discussion. Are we now as a church 2 years later, are we still the church that wants to pay down debt sooner for that purpose? And it's not evil if we don't. We're different people now.
And Caroline asked for this, but the downside of this is when we rolled into this, we made the body made pledges that match these numbers. So we would say, everyone had pledged and said, yeah, we can do this, and so we did it. Some people, as Landon explained in the video, have moved away. That's just the way it is. So we lost some of those pledges, as it naturally occurs. But some folks just haven't been giving their pledges. Now, some of that might be because financially you can't, and you're in a difficult place. And that's okay. And moreover, we'd love to know if you are hurting financially, because we're called to care for each other. And we'd want to be able to help you out. But others, for whatever reasons, maybe you just have plumb forgot about the pledge. But it is something that I think it's important for us as a body to call each other back to the commitments that we made a commitment to do this. And if we're able to do that, then let's continue to keep that pledge we made. For the sake, as Landon said, not just to give a certain percentage of money, but for the sake of the mission, to free up the church to have its funds, to be about what we're excited about, which is to multiply communities of light.
Here comes Josh.
I'm getting there.
And,
Come on, Deacon.
And while the microphone gets to Chrissy, I'll shut up in 1 second. We currently have 40 people giving on average about $50 a month to the building principal. That's how the numbers break out. So just to give people an idea how many people are doing it and what that number is.
So what's the process from here? It sounded like we're going to vote in the future or something about whether we're still doing this, or are we going to sort of re-pledge and see where the numbers are? Is that how we vote? When does that happen, and how is it going to happen?
Yeah, so from here, we wanted to have a discussion in smaller communities because not everybody's here tonight. Not everybody has a chance to hear this. So we're hoping all of the members will have a chance to listen and hear these questions and answers, and we'll talk about that. And your small groups will discuss and give some feedback to us. An option is that we will, as a part of the 2018 budget vote, re-pledge. All of us that have been doing it, all of us that said we would, we haven't had a chance to, and those of you that have come since then, and see how the numbers shake out. This time, we're going to propose that a yes vote has a pledge attached to it. And we may just come to the fact that we're just not going to be able to pay it off in 7 years as a body by how we vote with what we're going to do. That is okay. We're going to continue paying down as much as possible. I personally will keep giving over and above because I would like to see it. But we may just kind of release ourselves from the pressure of having to pay down that debt in 7 years. That's kind of where I think we're headed. And I assume that we'll kind of do a vote like that in December. But through this discussion, you guys may say, nope, we don't want to do it. And we hear very clearly, all right, well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to discover that through the fall. And as we propose the family meeting voting, both elders and 2018 budget vote, we will share that for sure. So,
Chrissy, that was a very important question. I want to make sure, does everybody understand the question and then understand the answer? Because I think understanding the process moving forward is really important. All right, good. That's key. Thanks.
John asked why we were going to vote. Why would we vote now for a decision to refinance in 5 years?
he is asking, why are we going to vote now for a decision to refinance in 5 years? We're not, no, but you meant not voting now, you meant voting in December. Right. I think those of us that were originally around at that time, we made that decision because there are people here I know that they really don't like churches that have debt. So we took on that debt trying to aggressively pay it down. We're kind of a different church now, and we're trying to see, are we the same type of church that wants to aggressively pay down that debt for the purpose of furthering mission, or are we not? And that's okay. We may find out that we're a church that's fine having a loan for 15 more years. There's going to be some of us that are frustrated by that, but we're one member of a larger body. So that's why, and I think some of us are interested in tying a vote to an actual pledge and finding out what's really there and kind of releasing ourselves from that pressure if that's just not what our body wants to do. If that makes sense. That's a great question, though.
But it really impacts budget strategy too. You know, if we're not going to put that money, if we're not seeking to direct funds to it, then when extra funds come in, what do we do with them? Does that make sense? Cool.
So guys, Landon, you made a statement about having a loan for the next 15 years. Was that just a carte blanche statement, or was that like
yes.
an off the cuff? Okay, so my original question was going to be, based on our current trajectory, we're not going to pay off in 7 years unless we drastically change. What's our current payoff date? We're talking 9 years, 10 years. If we are giving like we're giving currently, when are we looking at paying this off?
Yeah, I don't have the exact date, year, if you would, but at the end of 7 years, we'll have about, what would you say, 236,000 remaining at the current pace.
If everybody keeps doing what they're doing right
If everyone keeps giving at the same pace as what we're doing right now, we'll have about $236,000 loan at the end of the 7th year. Does that make sense?
It does. So after refinancing and being able to pay off more principal, you think another 3 years, another 4 years after that? I mean,
probably
at least helping the analysis
probably
of
another
like,
5 or
is
6.
this a big deal or not?
We'll definitely get those numbers out as this conversation goes on. Yeah.
Is there a place that we can go and see what the current balance is on our loan at like any given time? Is there an updatable is that
every
a thing on
Sunday
the bridge?
in the bulletin? Every Sunday in the bulletin, the latest numbers are there.
Thank you.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
No, just the balance.
Yeah, we've been putting the bulletin, so and on the sheets there in front of you as well. Okay, I see there's a couple of hands. That's great, but I want to respect our time too. So if you can stick around and do the Q&A afterwards, otherwise we're going to transition to getting our kids. But before I do, please, if you had those questions, keep your hands, keep them in your brain. I want to read this word of encouragement. This was from a member in our church. I won't say who, but this word of encouragement is for our whole body, because you guys have been serving amazingly and giving sacrificially. And I personally, and I think I speak on behalf of the whole elder team, am so grateful for this body, for this church family. By the grace of God, we have a good family. We're not perfect. We haven't it all figured out. We're not the only ones doing it right, blah, blah, blah. But by the grace of God, there's a lot of good things He's doing here among us. And I am grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful for you. And I want to read what another member of your family sent to us. Because like I said, it reflects on you. They said, there's so much here, I've got to limit it. For the last 3 years that we've been going here, I feel like Riverside has been operating better than it ever has in the last few years. I know that being in the daily grind of making all these things happen week in and week out, it's difficult to see the forest through the trees, but please know that your labor and your prayers and the hours you invest in this body is making a huge difference. I know there are probably a lot of things I don't see. And there's a lot of things that we as elders don't see that you all as a congregation day in, day out wrestle with. We know some, we know more of others than we do of others. And I get that. They'll always be there. But when I look around at our body and I walk with some of these people week to week, I don't see what lacks. I see and feel a deep sense of family and the Holy Spirit living and working among us. For the last 3 years, my spouse and I have walked and struggled amidst this body. And I have to say the Lord has used Riverside as an anchor for us in so many ways. Riverside is the reason we have stayed in Columbia when we thought we would never stay. It's been a tool to pull us out of deep heartache. It has been used to help hold us together when we thought hope was all but lost. Riverside has become our family, and I know it's the same for many others. So if you're tired or you're frustrated, you feel stuck in a rut, please don't give up. Find rest for your souls in the one who loves you and keep pressing forward. The Lord is working and using you in bigger ways than you know. Thank you.
If you need to get your kids, the childcare is ending. So you may want to get them. Or just see what happens. Just kidding. Don't do that. Yeah. Yeah, but if you want to stick around to ask questions, we'll sit right here.
Yeah. God, thank you for being in our midst tonight, for being with our elders, Lord. Thank you for the service of several years of Eric who's stepping down, Lord. I pray that you would continue to bless him and his family, Lord. Thank you for the elders who are currently serving our church body. Pray that you would continue to give them wisdom, Lord. Continue to free them up to preach your word and to pray and to teach and to help shape us, Lord. I pray that you would lead our congregation to really take hold of the vision that you have for our church. And in the next few months, Lord, I pray that you would help us clarify what that vision is, that we can put our resources where you would lead us to do that, Lord. And I thank you for all the people who could be here tonight and their families, Lord. I pray you'd keep us safe as we go home. And I pray that this conversation would continue in a really positive way and continue us on a trajectory to serving you better. In your name we pray. Amen.
Nominations to Stephen Justice, green shirt.
Or Monica.
Or Monica Schold.
I'm going to beat Bob.
If you're planning on coming back in here for the continued Q&A after you get your kids, let me just say, your kids can't go into the basement and run around unsupervised. I'm sorry. That's not safe for them or for any of the things in the basement. So you'll have to keep them somewhere where you can see them. Thank you. There's 30 kids running around the basement.
All right, so if you are staying for the Q&A, we're starting now for the extended Q&A. So if you had any questions, come on in.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will. So if you're sticking around, go ahead and come on in. And then Josh has got the mic. I saw 3 questions and we had to kind of shut down and transition. So we will begin with Betsy.
Okay. Hello.
I don't hear it.
Handheld mic, Jamie.
Okay. I was going to change the subject from the budget. I'm sure that Mike will be happy to hear that. I just wanted to know, you mentioned this guy in Oklahoma who's coming for a church plant. What other things are y'all doing to search for a church planter? I was just curious.
Praying. I mean, seriously, that should be our biggest prayer as a church is right now. But we.
I was just wondering, I mean, are we like talking to other Acts 29 churches and giving that information out, or?
Yeah, so we do have a partnership. We've committed part of our church planning budget for the Leaders Collective. It's Leader Collective, whatever, with Elliot Grudem, that he's developing these church planners. And that's honestly to us, part of that is that by committing this part of our budget to them, it leaves us a spot open for our interns, which is an attractive part of this internship, one. But then two is Elliot is out there recruiting for us because he knows what we're looking for, who we're looking for, that sort of thing. And Elliot is talking to church planners all across America, guys who want to get in. Elliot used to be pretty much in charge of Acts 29, and so yeah. So that is no, sorry, that just happened. Yeah.
I would say one of the things.
That was actually through the Free Church, because we're partnering not just with Acts 29, but we are actually right now supporting or coaching 2 church planners with the Evangelical Free Church in America. And Daniel Dugas contacted me because he was interested in the Free Church and planting in Colombia. But he's also Acts 29, so it's kind of a great combo. Yeah.
And I would say one other thing, while, right now we are dependent on outside guys that have the desire to plant to come in and go, we do, by having nights like tonight, want to put it out to all kinds of people in our own congregation. I hope down the road we have this conversation. We've got 3 or 4 guys that have been raised up within Riverside that have actively planted small groups. They've multiplied small groups, and we see their gifts and think maybe you could actually do this with a church. But by 2020, it's going to be tough. So small groups.
I also wanted to stop talking about money, so you beat me to that. I was just curious. I must not have read all the fine print in the bylaws, but why are we losing elders? I just missed that.
Why are we losing elders?
Yes.
He said because James, no, but just kidding. Elders serve for a 3-year term. They're eligible to do a second consecutive 3-year term, or they can choose to roll off. And these 3 men, well, the other one is, their 3 years are up, and Eric, because he coaches in the fall, it was best for him to roll off now. And then Tony and Michael have graciously stayed on through December to kind of help get us to the next season.
Okay, that makes sense. The other question is this. Let's say September hits and attendance is way up, because that's normally what happens with churches. Can we revisit the second service idea, or is it just not an option?
Ryan asked a good question earlier about are we prepared to do that? We're not prepared to go to 2 services this fall. I mean, could we slap something together? Probably. But we feel like when we looked at the data of when the students are in, the increase, we have 50 extra seats downstairs. We're hoping to absorb the increase this fall through the overflow room downstairs and kind of make it to that holiday season where we really dip down big time again until February, actually March.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. It takes a lot of our people to get on board with 2 services, and that's just not a lot of time to figure all those logistics out and get people on board.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things too, I mean, we've already started using the overfill space in the downstairs in the basement, but if it gets really cramped in here in the fall, we can just send a lot of old timers, old Riverside timers down to the basement, say, to the basement.
3 years plus, you're in the basement.
It's a good question, though. Thanks. Any other questions, or just our families waiting on us?
Anybody nominate Addie for a deacon?
Oh, man, perfect. If we make Mark Manning
Anybody else have a
deacon,
question?
he has to stay.
Nolan?
No other questions. All right, we figured it out.
Sweet.
That's it. Thank you. No more questions. I know you'll have some. We'll get emails. I know.
Where can people go to sign up if they found something in the ministry needs that they wanted to sign up for?
Where do people go to sign up if they want to sign up for a ministry need? Oh, you're going to put it on the screen for us. There you go. Ah. We'll get that in the email to everybody else.
The only problem is the only people left here are already signed up for 12 different ministries.
If you are listening, the 2 of you that are, I would ask you to encourage those that weren't here tonight when they get the email with this video and kind of stuff, ask them to really engage with it, because a lot of what we talked about affects them. And we hope that you'll kind of pursue these conversations in your small group when it's time to do that.
This feels really
And I would, we've really pushed building and grounds because there's a lot of need there. There's also a lot of need for Brother Ross over there with hospitality. I'm not suggesting that you guys, like the guys who are still in this room, the men and women, these are like the faithful, I'm preaching to the choir here. But if you, as people in your small group who are newer, hospitality is a great way for them to kind of get their feet wet. So maybe recommend that. There's a lot of need that Ross has for hospitality as well. So. All right, mic drop. Drop the mic, Chris.